Hello, everybody. We're going to talk about the effects of climate change in the sea. The aim of this lesson is to be able to describe some effects of climate change in the sea. So, let's start. Climate change is a long-term shift in global or regional climate patterns. When we're talking about climate change, we are usually talking about specifically the rise in global temperatures from the mid-20th century. This rise in global temperatures is said to be caused by human activity, which are increasing greenhouse gases through the burning of fossil fuels and cutting down of rainforests. So let's talk about some effects in the sea. The first effect that everyone has heard about is sea level rise. There are many reasons for sea level rise, however, one of them is that the air temperature is warming, which also warms up the sea. The water expands and the sea level rises. Many countries are already feeling the effect of sea level rise, but some small islands are already feeling the effect. Around the Seychelles, the sea has risen by around 20 centimeters in the past 10 years. Around 85% of its economic activities, which include tourism, happen along the coastline of the Seychelles, and these activities are all threatened with the rising sea levels. If there isn't any more coast, there aren't any more economic activities which bring in money to the country. Another reason for sea level rise is that the ice caps are melting. Because of global warming, ice in the Arctic and Antarctic is melting. Greenland's ice sheet, for example, covers around 80% of the island of Greenland. And if it completely melted, it could raise sea levels around the world by up to 7 meters. At the moment, this ice sheet in Greenland loses around 1 billion tons of water every day. That's a lot of water. That's equal to 400,000 Olympic swimming pools of ice melting every day. One of the largest effects that climate change has is the loss of habitat, which affects many Arctic and Antarctic plants and animals. Polar bears, for example, have a diet that is made up of mainly seals. The most successful way for a polar bear to hunt is to wait for a seal to surface from a hole in the ice. When the seal surfaces to breathe, the bear stands on its hind legs and drags it onto the ice. Since the ice has been decreasing in size, bears are finding it even harder to hunt and rest on the ice. They now have to swim longer distances for seals, and many times they are suffering from malnutrition and sometimes even starvation, especially females who have a pup. Narwhals are another example. They are totally adapted to living amongst thick sea ice. But with the sea ice melting, predators like orcas can swim into new areas. And these predators, these orcas, hunt narwhal. The melting sea ice is also opening the sea to more shipping. These large ships cause a lot of noise in the sea. This makes the narwhals not able to communicate, and the noise even scares away the fish that they eat. Coral reefs are very important. They're like rainforests in the sea. They offer spectacular sights, support diverse wildlife, provide jobs, food, and even coastal protection. All these things for around 500 million people around the world. Even a change of just 1 degree in ocean temperatures over several weeks, or if there are just a bit too many storms, can lead to coral bleaching. In the photo, you can see a diver next to a few corals that are passing through coral bleaching. If the corals are bleached for a long period, they eventually die. This is an example of before and after coral bleaching. Coral bleaching events often lead to the death of large amounts of corals. The bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef in 2016 and 17 in Australia killed around half of all the corals. Warmer ocean temperatures also means that fish are swimming away from their usual spots to look for better temperatures and to look for better feeding and breeding grounds. Fish that find sea temperatures too hot for comfort could either move north or south, away from the equator, or to deeper and colder waters. This would make it harder for fishermen to catch fish. An example is the red mullet. This is a fish that is frequently eaten in the warm Mediterranean. It is now being caught in the North Sea off of Great Britain and even in Norwegian waters. So this means that this fish is moving away from the Mediterranean and going to colder waters in the North Sea. This is bad news for fishermen in the Mediterranean. Oceans have thousands of currents that carry water around the planet. These currents act like a giant conveyor belt, like you can see in the animation. Warm water from near the equator flows towards the poles, and it cools, sinks, and begins flowing back toward the equator in a slow journey deep in the ocean. This happens because of the difference in temperature between the equator and the poles. Due to global warming, there is a smaller difference in temperature between the equator and the poles, which means that these currents are slowing down. The Gulf Stream, for example, is one of the strongest ocean currents in the world. This warm current brings warmth to Europe and North America, and is the reason we have mild winters. Without this warm ocean current, winter in the UK is estimated to be more than 5 degrees colder than it is right now. In the 16 and 1700s, there were frost fires in London. The New York harbor also froze. This was probably because the Gulf Stream slowed down by around 10%. Imagine the effects it would have now. The final check. In 2019, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, wrote this report. Which of these statements was not written in the report? Pause the video and allow yourself 2 minutes to work them out. When you're done, press play and check your answers. Okay, so the oceans are warming rapidly, which also damages coral reefs. That's true. That was written. Sea level rise is decreasing because the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets are melting slower. This is false. The statement in the actual report was that sea level rise is increasing because the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets are melting faster than they have ever done before. The last one, researchers are seeing more intense hurricanes, which pose increasing risks to coastlines. This is also a statement that was found in the report. Okay, remember, geography is everywhere.